Joining me once again is Rachel Vaughan, a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. Thank you for joining me again. Rachel, how are you going today?
I'm going good, thanks, Jeff. Pleasure to be here.
So there's an underground subterranean highway, and it's under capital cities, and that's where a lot of satanic ritual abuse occurs. Can you tell me more about that, please?
Okay, so from my research, my memories of the subterranean area below my father's, my former family home in Edwardstown is sketchy because of the amnesic trauma I went through. But I do have enough memory and have had enough memory to piece together, and with research, and a brilliant researcher who's come forward to help me with no cost. She's just done this, just to help. I've been able to find, or she's been able to find, these incredible websites where it's all there. It's all there. I'd say black and white, but it's actually in blue, blue lines, and they're big, fat, lovely blue lines. And another gentleman came forward to tell me that those big, fat blue lines, there's one on a particular avenue, and avenues and terraces are a place of interest for these tunnels. You see the name avenue or terrace, you may well have one of these tunnels beneath your street. This gentleman came forward to tell me that a place along Dawes Road in Daw Park had been excavated at some point, and he saw these big tunnels going in. Now, this tunnel, he said, at 6'2", he could walk through comfortably. Because of his information, I was then able to ascertain, because of the location of this tunnel that he saw going in the 70s, I was able to ascertain on these government websites what these big fat blue lines are, and they are not the normal stormwater pipes that the council has told me about, and you can turn these layers on and off with infrastructure on these government websites. And those 1 metre diameter stormwater tunnels they come up in different areas along different streets. They're not part of this system. This system is much larger. It's incredibly extensive. And it seems to lead from most creeks around Adelaide specifically. I haven't really researched any of the other cities, but if people want help with that, they can always contact me, and I can put them in touch with the researcher, or I can just help them myself. People can find me on my Facebook page. Rachel Vaughan has a water, what do I call it? A waterfall as my icon.
They go in and they explore some of these tunnel systems, and you can see a lot of satanic writing on the walls. Drain the blood. You see pentagram, and there's almost like altars that are made for a specific purpose, so they can get away with their crimes. That's where it all takes place, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there are specific. So the tunnels are an access point. Some of the rituals do occur down there, but there are other places along the tunnel system that have access to the tunnels. Houses, a lot of them are historic, and that's where the rituals occur. I have some crews on the ground that are looking into these places. One in particular has let me know about a place near Marion Shopping Centre. Now, I was told about this months ago, when my ITNJ testimony first came out. And apparently there is an altar that you move out the way, and there's a staircase beneath, and you can then go down the staircase. So there are all sorts of, I would say most Freemason halls would have some sort of access, or perhaps I shouldn't say most, but certainly some. So you've got access to these tunnels all over the place. And the fact that these government websites, it's all laid out there. It's all laid out. And I'm not scared to say that now, because I've got a multitude of screenshots that, and they're backed up in various places with various people. So I will have that system. You can't just move those tunnels easily. Although there is a great deal of construction going on around Adelaide at the moment, an enormous amount, in fact, more than usual. And this researcher keeps an eye on those things, and it seems that a lot of those access points are being covered, so that you can't just walk into those tunnels now. They're putting grates on them.
And they're under Freemason lodges, courthouses, and they link to public libraries, and a lot of high-level dignitaries and profile figures are down there. People that you wouldn't think of, and they're engaging in satanic ritual abuse, aren't they, Rachel?
Yeah. I have a bit of a thing about people with Order of Australia medals and titles. Don't trust them. That's my personal opinion. The tunnel systems are extensive. I've refrained from publishing some of the information that I've received, just simply because I'm concerned that a lot of people might go down there and get hurt. But what really annoys me is I've met with council, I've put in freedom of information requests through, again, a multitude of departments, all the departments that you would expect to go through: defence councils, historical societies, archives, etc. No one seems to know where these tunnels are, but they're on the websites. So is it just me, or does there appear to be a conspiracy, or are they just not allowed to publish this information because of the dangers involved, or is it just that they want to keep them secret so they can keep doing what they're doing?
And on a lot of ritualistic dates, that's where you have a lot of sacrifices, don't you? You got Halloween,
Yes.
there's a blood
Yes.
moon, and there's other times and dates. That's where they draw in the energy, because they know the higher calendar and the higher time that they're ruling their life by, and it's all dark energy.
And when you have a large number of people all performing those rituals at the same time on the same date, that, for want of a better word, calls in a lot of negative energy. So that there is a system involved, and it's eons old. This is paganism going back, a very, very long time, thousands of years. Yeah. So these are long-held belief systems that, just because you have the advent of psychology who says that, demons don't exist and angels don't exist and it's all schizophrenia, just because that advent came in the last 50 years or so doesn't mean that thousands of years of history and rituals don't just disappear. It's just that psychology has a way of making us lay people look like we're crazy, whereas all the people in the elite systems are practicing these behaviours.
And that's exactly what's happening. And even if the common person doesn't believe it, the elite and the globalists believe it. And that's what it comes down to. Now, the whereabouts of the Beaumont children, they were at a beach and then they disappeared. And you have inside information about the whereabouts of these missing children, don't you, Rachel?
Yes, I do. So I wasn't born in 66, I was born in 73, but my two siblings were present on the day, and my father has backed them up on this, where a man called Anthony Monroe brought the dead children back to our former family home in Edwardstown. Now, my father said that on film. My sister's been making allegations about that since 2007, and my brother, hopefully, Andrew, will come on and talk to you about that. Andrew had experiences where Monroe raced him to Stansbury one day, and by race I mean he was quite terrified because Anthony Monroe was driving so fast, to show Andrew that the sinkhole at Stansbury had been filled in. And there was a big kerfuffle about some rubbish about all the sheep on the property had supposedly fallen in the sinkhole, followed each other into the sinkhole. I mean, sheep aren't that stupid. So some of the reasoning behind the sinkhole being closed over because of this dreadful smell that was coming out of it, just so irrational and illogical. So Andrew can give you a bit more information on that when he speaks with you, hopefully. Okay. But there just seems to be so much anecdotal evidence. And Andrew and Ruth have provided or offered, particularly Andrew, actual evidence. He believes he knows where the shotgun that was used to harm the children is located. There was a knife, the whereabouts of which was given to Safewell. These things are always ignored, or have always been ignored with us anyway. When there's evidence available and police will not look it up, you've got to be concerned. Now, there's two of my father's good friends. Anthony Monroe's already twice convicted pedophile, very close friend of my father. I could show you 15 photographs of them together from the 60s, at least, that I have personally. John Pike's facing 170 counts of child sex abuse, alleged abuse. I know that my father had a lot more pedophile friends, but those two we can prove, and we can connect to Max, my father, through photographs and lots of other evidence. When you've got a man who 3 of his children are alleging abused them horrifically, as my siblings and I are alleging, who has convicted pedophiles as friends, who makes statements like he found his naked son in bed with Anthony Monroe, an adult male, and didn't make a scene, these are things that beg a belief. Why are allegations being ignored?
Exactly. And you can always judge someone by the company they keep. And if they're surrounding themselves by pedophiles and unsavory characters, then you can pretty much have a good description of what that person is about.
Yep.
And some of these horrific acts, and you even stated your father had a trapdoor underneath his bedroom, didn't he?
Yep, he certainly did. And I've been on, so that house was sold last year, shortly after my ITNJ testimony was released. In fact, within a couple of weeks. Now, I've looked on the real estate website, and the photographs of that house are still up there. And you can see where there are structural problems with that house. And I've since heard there are structural problems with the shed. And I know why there are structural problems with the shed. There's a bloody great kiln underneath. And those kilns, through my research, I've discovered, because that kiln was built in 1926. They last for about 100 years before they collapse. That kiln's 93 years old. So those structural problems with that shed are as a result of this edifice underground. And you can see in the end bedroom that looks out onto the backyard, you can see that just above the pelmet there's these cracks in the window, just above the window in the wall. So obviously, so I remember there being a trapdoor beneath what is where the bed is in those photographs on the website. Interestingly, just before the house was sold to one of my family members by my father, the floorboards in that spot where the trapdoor was were all pulled up with no explanation given as to why they would have been pulled up. And I remember the family member being quite astounded. Who would break in and pull up floorboards? Well, they had to so that they could hide where the hatch had been, because you can't just miraculously fix up, a square, a hatch, which was probably a good two feet wide, maybe a foot and a half deep. So that's why those floorboards were pulled up. And it's just beneath the window, basically, where the hatch was. So yeah, there was a hatch there. If you look on the website, there's a pantry in the laundry. Strange place to put a kitchen pantry, but there you go. And the pantry was actually my father put in a ship's ballast tank as the actual pantry. It didn't fit the space that he put it into, so that there was space on either side of the ballast tank and behind it where you could shimmy down from the roof space into the underground space. So it's very convoluted. He was quite clever in the way that he did these things.
And as a kiln there's like a furnace where they're burning bodies that have been dismembered.
Just a small sort of unit that you would burn rubbish in when back in the 60s and 70s, when people did that sort of thing. It's sort of a regular basis thing. And Andrew remembers saying it was Andrew's job on a daily basis for about a year to burn these packages that were wrapped in butcher's paper that his father, or our father, insisted he burn. Now, one day, apparently, the cat got into the packages, and Andrew noticed that whatever it was that was wrapped up looked human. So being the intelligent man child that he was only young then, he unwrapped then all of those packages and found that it was the majority of a human being. Now, when my father found out that he had done that, the next time Andrew had to burn the packages, my father put live shells in there so that Andrew nearly had his head taken off. And
that was done deliberately, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a lesson. That's the sort of lesson our father would mete out to us. It was usually, a close to death type lesson. He used to try and kill me regularly, but he didn't let me die. I thought maybe stupidly I might have been, special and I might have had some ability not to be knocked off. But I think I've since learned it's an MK Ultra tactic, so that you're constantly given these traumas, and one of them is to bring you to very, very close to death and then allow you to be resurrected. So yeah, it's at least 6 times that I remember him doing things to me to kill me. Yeah.
It's a wonder you're still alive now.
Yep, still here.
And your father was involved in the Rosicrucians, the Church of the Golden Dawn, and Freemasonry, and that's what allowed him to operate with full immunity, wasn't it, Rachel?
That and his very good friends in the judiciary and the medical fraternity, yes. And obviously in SAPOL. He also called himself a whistleblower and an informant to federal police. So he had immunity from many different areas, and he still has it now. And I don't believe it's because his name is being protected, because he was, excuse the term, just a shit kicker. He never had a title, but I think it's because he blackmailed a lot of people as well. So what you're seeing with the Epstein case in America, this is a very common tactic that happens all over the world where people are blackmailed. And there is talk of these bitumized canisters, old milk canisters that used to be quite large apparently. This is before my time. And Max bitumized the outside of these canisters so that they were waterproof, and apparently kept some pretty special stuff inside. And that was the only thing of interest when my brother Andrew was giving his statement to police in 2016. The only thing that they asked him about, they refused to take Andrew's folder of allegations and information. Didn't want any of that, the brief of evidence, but they did want to know about those canisters. So again, it's just more cover-ups and protection. I'd love to know what he's got in there. He was constantly filming us. I was used to be filmed with what I assume must have been important people. Otherwise, I don't know why he bothered to film it, unless it was just purely for child pornography purposes. But as a very small child, I was filmed with quite a few men. And I can imagine that those films must be somewhere. We're going back to the 80s and 70s, so whether or not they've survived, I don't know. But they could have. They could have.
And what's really alarming is when people contact authorities and they're all linked in with Freemason lodges, and once they reach the level of inspector, they're required to join the lodge. It's like a prerequisite. And then investigations ended, people get taken off the case, and that's where these criminals have free rein, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Inspector, I heard it was sergeant, but inspector, that makes sense as well. Yeah. Look, it seems to me you don't get anywhere really in SAPOL unless you sign in. And the number of officers that I've dealt with that were decent, haven't been a great number, but there've been a few, and my siblings have had the same experience where they get moved on. So the gentleman who helped my brother Andrew get this conviction against Anthony Monroe was soon moved out of that section once the conviction was put in place. It seemed like a demotion. Whether or not he sees it that way, I don't know. Apparently he's still trying to get back into the section that he was in originally.
And when authorities were alerted, your father was even joking, and they all had a big laugh about some of the crimes that were committed, and then it was all brushed under the carpet, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my father had this thing that he would do. If I ever, and I was dreaming about it last night, if I ever approached him or let him know that I remembered or I knew something, he'd give me this demonic smile, and his eyes would twinkle. It was like he had a light from the inside. He was utterly delighted. And there was one time I made phone calls about Louise Bell being kept under the house. She was kept under the house from sometime in winter of '83 until her demise in September. And during that time, this girl was the same age as me. And I was made to take her food, and I was made to be her jailer. And so I was determined to get her out of there. So I made phone calls from the local phone boxes. There were only 2, very close to where I lived. I did that on 3 occasions. On the 3rd occasion, and I got pulled up each time. So obviously whoever those operators were decent enough to follow up and put those calls through. But the 3rd time I did it, I was in my bedroom, and I heard the officers come to the front door. I heard my father murmuring, because my bedroom was just behind the wall of the front door, or the lounge room where the front door was, and I heard my father speaking in his low, deep voice. And then I think I heard the officer say something along the lines of, "She's done it again. She's done it again." And then some more murmuring, and then laughter. Laughter. They thought it was hilarious. And that was when he sat me down and explained to me that if she didn't die, I would. And that he had orchestrated all of this to save my life. And that's why she was taken, in lieu of me, Louise, in lieu of me. So that's, yeah, he had this thing about names, and her surname was very important.
Extremely.
The name was very important.
And cruel. And the way they operate, they believe they're doing good work with eugenics and eliminating children from broken families. They used to abduct children from orphanages, didn't they?
Yes, yes. Yeah. So I have one memory of, it may well have been the Goodwood Orphanage, because I remember all this red brick in the background, big structures, and running around in a quadrangle at the front, and I had to select this young boy. That was my job. My father was in the car, his friend, WB, who's also a person of interest in the Beaumont disappearance. I would have been about 2 or 3 at the time. I was to go and select a friend, and we were going to take them out in the boat. We were going to have a lovely time. So being so young and innocent, I didn't instantaneously think, oh, this is not going to be a good thing. And a lot of the children ignored me. I ran around in there for about, I don't know, no concept of time at that age. And then this sweet little boy friended me, and he would have been about a year older than me, dark hair, dark eyes. I convinced him to come with us. Got in the car, we went out in the boat, and he was murdered. And I had to listen to what they did to him first, because they did it in the cabin. I was outside the cabin. It was bloody horrible. And then they disposed of him in a way which got rid of all the evidence. So
roughly,
yeah, so there was a lot of that.
I think you've witnessed.
So what makes me wonder is, that little boy must have belonged to the orphanage, or wherever I was. Say it was Goodwood Orphanage. Did he get registered as missing? Did anybody notice it? Did Max organise this beforehand so that he'd go and check out any kid he wanted? That's what concerns me. And when you read books like Red Tape Rape and other books very similar, where they say that these children were like takeaway children that could just be accessed at any point, taken off, anything could be done to them. They got returned or they didn't get returned.
They're concerned, and they're going to follow up on that. So that gives them a level of confidence to get away with their crimes undetected, doesn't it?
Well, it does make you wonder if the orphanage was complicit. It's one more mouth they don't have to feed.
Very sad, isn't it? And not many people are aware of this. So it's really good to bring that to light and showcase that, because a lot of people think that the orphanages and some of these foster families are doing good work, but they're all linked in with courthouses and docks, and and that's what they're taking children away from loving families and putting them into houses of predators so they can be abducted. Like, that's what's happening.
And they're targeting certain families. So they'll target affluent families, because then the family court system gets to take all their money off them, because on average, a person who's had their child or children taken from the DCP will pay $250,000 up to $750,000 in court fees. That's an average. So you lose your children, you lose your house, you lose everything. A lot of these people also lose their ability to make a living because they're so traumatized. So you've got broken families. Other people that are targeted are people on disability pensions, because again, they won't have the finances to fight, but they'll also, if they're unwell, they won't have the ability to fight. They won't have the strength. What really is disturbing, and I'm not an expert on this, these are all just statistics that have been given to me, that it's roughly a $46,000 benefit to the Department of Child Protection every time they take a child and place it in a foster family. Foster family doesn't get that money. The Child Protection Department gets that money. So you've got to ask yourself, are they really going to care what happens to these children, or are they worried about that money?
Exactly.
And again, as I said in our last talk, it's typically the very young DCP workers who have no children, have clearly no empathy.
That's right.
And are just simply following orders that are put on the worst cases. So if they really want that child, they'll go for it. Another thing that has to be taken into consideration, blonde, blue-eyed children are preferred. So they will go after those specifically. Children with things like coloboma, which is an eye issue, where the iris sort of, the pupil sort of bleeds out into the iris, like Madeleine McCann. These children are also targeted. Yeah. So you've got certain characteristics that they're after. And I'll walk around school holidays. I live in a holiday destination, and I was walking around school holidays with my friends, and I saw these children playing, and there was this one girl with very, very long blonde hair, and she was very beautiful, and part of me just wanted to run up to the parents and say, cut her hair off because she looks too pretty, she's a target, you know, and that's completely irrational. You can't do that, and I didn't. But it's that sort of, that's how I think now. I think, you know, you don't want your child to stand out.
It's sad when people have to take drastic measures to keep their children safe from predators.
Exactly. What sort of world are we living in?
That's right. And all these systems are linked in. When someone makes an accusation or alleges this corruption, they get dismissed. And
yes,
that must make you feel all alone in this particular situation, doesn't it? When nobody is listening.
It did for a long time, but by being loud and being an activist now, I realise that it's across the board. I am not alone. My siblings are not alone. This is really common. If you've got a serious crime that you've witnessed and you make allegations, vast majority of the time you'll be ignored. Not just ignored.
When people
you'll be denigrated.
Media, A Current Affair, and other programs, they don't want to take on these stories because they're all linked in with Operation Mockingbird, the CIA. It's all infiltrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So victims.
So since I gave testimony to the ITNJ in August last year, the only media outlets that have come forward to me are like yourself, smaller outlets that you know, are usually volunteers that do it, you know, not for money but because they care.
Yeah.
So I've not had any mainstream media approach me, none whatsoever. Not that I would go for that, and I would not ever give this information to the mainstream media, and it took me a year. I thought, in my naivety, I would let SAPOL and the South Australian government sit on my ITNJ testimony and, you know, maybe do something. I gave them some time. They've not done it. So now again, I've got to do this with all these amazing people that have stepped up to help me, people like yourself who are willing to air the information. So, you know, the grounds root level assistance that I've been given is astounding. I feel so incredibly lucky.
Are really concerned. They don't want to put their children in scouts anymore or daycare because they're worried about some of the people that are overseeing, and the duty of care isn't trustworthy. What would be your advice to parents that are really concerned because they have a job to attend to and they need childcare?
Okay, well, let me just say, as a parent myself, I've never ever felt comfortable leaving my children in any of those situations, and never have. They don't do scouts, no blue light discos, none of that stuff, and I never would. And when grandchildren come, that'll be my suggestion to my children, that it would not be a bright thing to do. I guess you know, people used to have much better communities where they had grandparents and aunties and uncles and all those people that they could fall back on. But when you've got very disparate communities where people are disbanded and disconnected, you don't have those family connections. And quite frankly, you know, the number of people that are abused by family members anyway, it sort of scares you.
It does.
I really don't know what the solution is, apart from watch them very carefully. You know, being a helicopter parent's not such a terrible thing.
And what upsets me is a lot of these perpetrators, the information about their crimes are released after they die and not during it's being committed. And that's orchestrated, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And that's incredibly frustrating as well. So my father's footage where he said to Brian Littley that Anthony Monroe brought the dead Beaumont children to his house in Edwardstown on the day they went missing, that couldn't be aired until he died. Now, you know, Brian quite courageously put that in an Advertiser article in 2015. There still was no action from SAPOL. Look, that things seem to be changing a little bit, you know, little steps. So the Attorney General, current Attorney General, Vicky Chapman, has put in a bill and hopefully it will be passed. I'm not sure if it has. I've been looking up articles today to see if it has been. I can't see them anywhere. Where automatic suppression orders on sex offenders will no longer be just an automatic thing. The courts will still be able to apply for them, and they probably will do it in most cases, but it's not an automatic thing. Now, it shouldn't be an automatic thing. You know, when someone's alleged that they break and enter, or if it's alleged that they beat their wife, all those things get put up there, you know, and they might be innocent. But when it comes to people that are predators of children, they get protected. Now, there was some really horrific statistics that came out in April this year, and this was through the Daily Mail, okay, a UK
right
mouthpiece. So basically, I always believed that South Australia was the pedophile state, and the statistics that were given was that it's 1 in 800 people in South Australia are a convicted pedophile. 1 in 800.
That's
the statistics for it's shocking. And when you think that the number of convicted pedophiles is a very small number of the actual perpetrators, that's double the number in Victoria per capita. But I looked into this today so that I could talk about it. It's actually 1 in 739 for Western Australia, which is interesting because you don't hear a lot about the pedophile pandemic in Western Australia. But WA and South Australia have the worst numbers. 1 in 739, 1 in 804. That's too many. Too many pedophiles. And these are convicted. What do we do about them all? I really don't know. I don't know what the solution is. And I get very frustrated with that because I think about it a lot. What do you do with these people? You know, how were they indoctrinated into this in the first place? Around a third of abuse victims go on to be abusers. There is a real there's a real problem with the way that female child sex abusers are credited for their abuse. Apparently around 21% of the abusers aren't female abusers, aren't recognised for that. So, and they supposedly make up about 25% of the pedophiles around us. So that's a huge number that are not being associated with these crimes and need to be named and shamed like the men. They shouldn't be treated any differently.
There shouldn't be
and I was abused by both.
Handed out. And you even stated that your father would perform medical surgeries on some of the animals there. Yeah. You didn't witness it firsthand, but that's what you heard.
Well, I thought about that after, Jeff, and I did on one occasion, but it wasn't what I would describe as a medical surgery. He got this poor cat and pinned it out on a board, and I had to skin it. Now, I love cats. This thing was alive. So, yeah, he did horrific things, not just to people, but to animals as well. So there was some sort of, I'm not sure what the drug is. Someone did mention it to me, but I can't remember what the name was. There is some sort of anesthetic, there is some sort of paralytic drug that you can give to people where they're fully conscious, but they cannot move. And that's what I was given through some of these medical procedures that were done on me, particularly in abortion, where I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything about it, but I could feel everything. And with this cat was growling, but it couldn't move. So it was obviously in an intense pain. It was horrible. It was a Johnny's Bakery. He told me that the pies and pasties contained this flesh, and that it was little boys and girls. Now, just down the road was a boys' home, where a significant number went missing during the time that he told me that these things were occurring. I did see the dismemberment of 2 adult males in a very close location. He told me that that was also being used for certain things, but I actually saw them being packed into suitcases. So I don't think that they were going to be used for food, but I didn't see where the organs went. So perhaps the organs were being used for that, but I know that they were taken out. I was forced to watch that as well. This bakery that's been empty for decades, it's got a lovely fence out the front, very fancy new fence, lots of security. Doesn't appear to have anything to do with any kind of business. It's empty. Interesting. I'd love to know if that's an access point for tunnels.
Very suspicious, isn't it?
Very.
And when it comes down to satanic rituals, they believe after a certain amount of kills, they will become immortal. And that's written in satanic texts, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I wasn't aware of that until So my father used to tell me if he ate the flesh of 100 victims, and I'm presuming he didn't mean like the whole victim. I'm presuming he meant some of it. Of 100 victims, he would become immortal. Well, either he didn't achieve that, or it's not true, and I suspect it's not true. This has since come back to me as verification of what my father told me as a child, that this is something that other people actually do believe. So yes, it is written into, you know, Luciferian ritual manuals. A very strange belief system. So you've got to wonder, where do these ideas come from?
Exactly.
And I have to say, it's little wonder.
That's right, and it's almost like a ritualistic passage and a rite of way when it comes down to these lodges. And
Yes.
when it comes down to satanic craft, they like to do the opposite of religion. So they do a black mass.
Yes.
And that's when it comes down to that. They devour human flesh, don't they, Rachel?
Yes, they do. Yeah. It brings them all together. It means that they're all complicit in the same crime, which also brings them all together. In their belief system, they're all imbibing of that person's soul, taking a little bit of that person's soul, and holding on to it. So for all of those people, it's a bonding ritual. They feel closer to one another, whereas, you know, normal people like you and I would feel closer to someone who's kind or altruistic.
That's right.
Or, you know, does volunteering work, you know, for those that are less fortunate. These people find this bond of having taken part in something that horrific brings them closer together. It creates a trust between them.
And they're compromised as well, because if they ever speak out about it, they've got evidence and they can just ruin someone's career as well.
Yeah. And that's a really good word to bring up, Jeff, compromise. So when these children, like myself, are sexually abused in childhood, if they're allowed to reach adulthood, as I was, they will be compromised. Now, I thank God that I'm not male, because it's easier to compromise a male than a female. So that, you know, once that compromise has occurred, that person will be too terrified to come forward and talk about what's happened to them, lest they then be labelled with the same horrible brush, labelled as a pedophile themselves. That's why people don't talk about this very often. And then they're stuck in the cult forever. They can't get out. And then they often give up their own children. So like in those, there's some tunnel footage put up by a couple of guys. The YouTube channel's called Tunnel Truths. And like you said, the graffiti in one particular video that they have up is terrifying. It's horrifying. So one of the pieces of graffiti that really stood out to me was the words, "Your firstborn is mine." Now, this was a belief amongst my father's group. They all gave up their firstborn child to the cult. Now, this could be in a range of ways. Either it's sacrificed at birth and never registered. It could be trafficked, used as an abuse victim and die later of an accident. Or it will be recruited into the cult. But the firstborn almost always gets the worst treatment.
That's very common.
Yeah. And I can vouch for that for one of my siblings in particular, who's been compromised in the worst possible way. Not the two that have corroborated with me, but another one.
And you see them, they're drinking blood out of a chalice and they're drunk with power. And these satanic rituals, and you can hear a blood-curdling scream. It's absolutely horrifying, isn't it? How anyone could imagine doing such things to innocent children. It's unfathomable, isn't it, Rachel?
Oh, it truly is. It truly is. How could anybody enjoy that? I find it annoying when people squash spiders in front of me, because I think, well, it's an entity. But let alone doing these hideous things, and I'm talking hideous things. This is not just your run-of-the-mill vanilla style murder. These murders take a long time. So these people are enjoying it, those that are watching. That takes a certain kind of person, obviously a psychopath. They have no compassion or empathy. They are like a different race. And again, I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if it's 1 in 800, you know, the statistics were for the Daily Mail article, that's about 17,000 convicted pedophiles in Australia, in the whole of Australia. That's just the convicted ones. What do you do with 17,000 people that think it's okay to rape children? It's a large number of people. Where do you house them? You can't put them together because they'll all work together in a network. You can't put them out in the community. You can't put them on an island somewhere because, again, they'll all work together and you've just got Pedophile Island. I don't know if I believe in the death penalty. A lot of people bandy that about.
A lot of these child trafficking rings operate under the guise of a charity, don't they?
Oh, yeah. And that's where you've got, you know, the Clintons, their foundation. You've got some very, very big, powerful people who are the organisers of this mass worldwide trafficking system.
And a lot of people have trust in government, and they wouldn't believe that it's happening on such an industrial scale. There's children being ritualistically sacrificed, and it's happening in a way that people wouldn't understand. What would be your advice to someone that's struggling to process this whole idea of child sacrifice?
Well, first of all, look at the statistics. 25,000 children go missing in Australia each year, 800,000 in America. The other countries around the world have similar statistics per capita. Where do all those children go? Where do these people that believe in government and think that SAPOL and all the other police departments are out there to help everybody, where do they think all those children go? We hear about a fraction of 1% in the media. So look at your statistics. Don't take mainstream media as gospel, because the people who own those outlets have an agenda and they want you to be stupid. For God's sake, don't drink municipal water, because, again, there are elements in that water, such as fluoride, which are designed to make you dumb you down, basically. It's designed to dumb you down. And I suppose, I mean, whether or not people will take this advice or not, I don't know. But listen to people like myself making these heartfelt pleas. I don't get paid for any of this. This is not something that's made me any money. It's cost me a lot of money. Andrew has estimated it's cost him about $100,000 in court fees and just running around trying to find stuff out. That doesn't even count for the lost wages. It costs a lot of money, and it costs a lot of time and effort, and it costs a lot on an emotional and physical level to be an activist in this way, to fight for these things. It doesn't benefit you in any way, shape or form. It takes a lot of time.
And especially with your peers and work colleagues and family, it's very alarming news to bring forward. Now, a lot of these Satanists, they like to take jobs like abortionists, where they can conduct these practices and get paid for it.
Yeah.
They're like ghouls, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. So you've got utter psychopaths, no empathy, no compassion. They see these aborted fetuses as a means to an end. Obviously, there's a lot of money in it. I mean, that's obvious. And if you read, you know, Google it. There's a lot of information out there about what happens to these aborted fetuses. There was a bill passed recently in Australia where babies can be aborted right up until they're ready to be birthed. This is really, really disturbing. I don't know how that possibly could have got through. This is the sort of world we are living in. I don't know why or how that could be allowed, but it is. And when you look at, you know, we are a capitalist society. It's about money. It's certainly not about morals. It's not about concern for children in any of these areas. You know, children are a commodity. Babies are a commodity. Human flesh is a commodity. And for anybody who doesn't want to believe that, I'm really sorry. But that's the world you live in. And you can put your head in the sand and pretend it doesn't happen. And good luck to you. I wish I could do that. I can't. or you can be informed so that you can protect the people that you love and yourself.
Very great answer, and that's exactly what should happen. People feel helpless and they don't know how to combat these abuses that are taking place. People should jump on social media and try and share stories like yours, shouldn't they, Rachel?
Yeah, they should. I mean, they should be also aware there'll be a huge backlash. You know, it's not something that you just do for fun. It's not fun. And, you know, in my case, I've had to work very, very hard to try and get some sort of credibility through all of this. So, you know, it might be advisable to, even if you can't get a conviction, like try to get a conviction against your abusers. But if you can't, you can apply for victim of crime status. Doesn't necessarily mean you'll get a payout, but you can apply for that status even without a conviction. It's called an ex gratia discretionary victim of crime application.
Yeah.
That should give you some protection from the mainstream media. So, you know, all this time since my ITNJ testimony aired, I've had the concern that I would be torn apart in the media. And I have trolls, one in particular who's very vocal. She's quite convinced that she knew my childhood a lot better than I did. And I don't even remember her being in my life until my late teens. So, but she insists that she was. She's constantly threatening this podcast that she's got coming up, you know, and I've had to go through this whole process of going for this victim of crime status to try and ward off people like her because she's just so adamant. So I would also like to point out that there is a petition on Change. If you Google Stansbury petition, you can sign up to have forced SAPOL to exhume the remains of the Beaumont children at the Stansbury property that my father used to own.
Yes. And
please sign.
That's right. And a lot of victims step forward, and what you see takes place is a lot of gaslighting. They try and make you feel like that you're not telling the truth when you actually are. It's another form of power play, isn't it?
Yes. I'm still trying to suss out whether or not this particular troll is just incredibly stupid, or she's being paid. And I suspect, I suspect both, but I suspect the latter.
Very sad. So what plans have you got in future to combat this attack on children and the satanic rituals that are taking place? What have you got put in place?
So I've amassed a lot of friends, a lot of people that have come out of the woodwork. I'm helping other victims try to get themselves together enough to make up their allegations. I will continue to speak to people like yourself, Jeff, whether it's on air or giving interviews, or whether it's just privately, just to try and help people. I've amassed a fair amount of information, contacts, so that if people do come forward to me, I can hopefully put them in the right direction. So, I mean, my dream would be to have some sort of, I don't want to call it a foundation because foundations get really bad rap, but some sort of organisation where I can help people. But I can take what's happened to me and my fight to get justice and help other people to do the same. So that's my plan. That's my dream. Once well, my big dream is that this gets sorted out and these bodies are exhumed in these two locations. Having said that, I'm not going to give up and just stop after that. There's no holiday for me after this. My life, I'm assuming from this point forward, will be the same, but I'll be helping other people rather than dealing with my own stuff. And I'm hoping that will be easier than having to deal with my own stuff.
You're a wonderfully brave woman, and I thank you so much for appearing on the We Are Change talk show. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you, Jeff.